Long before humans reached the stars, the galaxy already had its stories. Old warnings carried through generations of alien civilizations. These stories spoke about a strange and dangerous species, one that would rise suddenly from a small blue world and spread faster than anyone could control. The story said this species would not conquer with weapons or destroy with fire. Instead, it would change everything it touched simply by being what it was. For centuries, most aliens believed those warnings were only myths, ghost tales told by old captains around dimly lit spaceports. They said things like, "Beware the species of adaptation," or, "When they arrive, the stars will never be the same." It was something to laugh about after a long journey, not something anyone really believed, but all that changed when humans finally appeared. At first, the arrival of humans seemed small and unimportant. A few awkward ships built from steel and courage entered known space. The first encounters were filled with confusion, languages no one understood, technology that seemed primitive compared to the sleek, shining vessels of the older races. To many, humanity looked weak, fragile, even a little lost. They were newcomers who had stumbled into a galaxy already full of ancient empires, trade routes, and laws written long before Earth even had electricity. The Consortium of Civilized Worlds, the oldest and most powerful organization in the galaxy, kept a close eye on these new arrivals. To them, humans were just another species looking for a place among the stars. But when they saw how quickly humans began learning, doubts began to grow. Within months, human scientists were translating alien texts, learning technologies that had taken others centuries to master. Within a few years, human engineers were improving devices that had been considered perfect for generations. Still, the consortium did not act. They simply watched. Humans had a strange charm that disarmed even their rivals. They were loud, emotional, and endlessly curious. They asked questions others would never dare to ask. They laughed too easily, argued too freely, and dreamed too big. But somehow that made them alive in a way that the rest of the galaxy wasn't anymore. When humans entered the diplomatic halls of the consortium, they didn't come with threats or arrogance. They came with ideas about cooperation, trade, and shared exploration. Many alien diplomats found themselves liking these strange creatures from the blue planet. They were unpredictable, yes, but they brought something rare: hope. Over time, humanity began to spread. Small colonies appeared on distant moons and planets. They weren't the most advanced colonies, but they survived always. Whether it was the icy winds of Titan-like worlds or the blazing deserts of uninhabitable planets, humans found ways to adapt. They built shelters from dust, grew food in soil that shouldn't support life, and smiled through storms that would have broken others. And soon, other species began to notice a pattern. Wherever humans went, things changed, not always in obvious ways, but deeply. Worlds that were quiet before became full of energy and life. Trade increased. Old conflicts faded. Even alien societies that had grown cold and mechanical began showing emotion again, influenced by the human way of seeing the universe, not as something to control, but as something to explore. It was during this time that the whispers began again. Some remembered the old warnings. Some said the legends were not wrong. They were just misunderstood. The story of the contagion species didn't sound like a myth anymore. It sounded like a prophecy slowly coming true. In the great data libraries of the consortium, records began to resurface. Ancient transmissions, unreadable scripts from long-extinct civilizations. The words were simple yet haunting. They will come from the cradle of chaos. They will adapt to everything, and everything will adapt to them. The scholars argued endlessly over the meaning. Some said it was nonsense, others believed it referred to humans. A few even claimed the ancient texts predicted that the galaxy itself would shift once this species arrived, that progress, chaos, and unity would all follow in their path. The older empires grew nervous, especially those that had ruled for ages without challenge. Humanity didn't look dangerous, but something about them felt different. Their emotions ran deep, their creativity had no limit, and they didn't seem to fear failure. If a machine broke, they fixed it. If a plan failed, they made a new one. If a law stood in their way, they changed it. Unlike most species, humans didn't see obstacles as endings. They saw them as puzzles to be solved. Despite their growing influence, humans never acted like conquerors. They didn't invade, didn't demand tribute, and didn't boast of power. They simply built, learned, and shared. But the more they shared, the more they seemed to change what they touched. Alien engineers noticed that when humans worked beside them, their designs improved in unexpected ways. Communication systems became faster, reactors became more efficient, and even biological processes began shifting slightly in mixed colonies. It was as if humanity carried an invisible spark that awakened creativity in others. No one could explain it. No one could stop it. Some called it human influence. Others whispered a darker name, the living contagion. But whatever it was, it spread quietly, through ideas, through cooperation, through the smallest acts of kindness and curiosity. There was a story told among alien traders about a small outpost on the edge of consortium space. It was dying, its oxygen systems failing, crops failing, and morale gone. A single human technician arrived to help. No one expected much. Their technology was outdated, and their resources were limited. But within weeks, the colony began to recover. The human didn't bring advanced tools or secret knowledge. They simply worked tirelessly, fixed what they could, and inspired others to do the same. Soon the alien colonists began thinking differently, improvising, creating. By the time the consortium sent help, the colony was thriving again. That small story became a legend, and like all legends, it carried a seed of truth. Back in the core worlds, the leaders of the consortium started private meetings. They spoke behind closed doors about how humanity was changing things too fast. Their fear wasn't about weapons, it was about ideas. Humanity didn't just adapt. They made everyone else adapt too. They began limiting human expansion, placing restrictions on trade and exploration. They said it was for stability, but deep down it was fear. They feared what would happen if humans kept growing, if their spark reached every corner of the galaxy. But humans, being humans, didn't stop. They simply found new paths. They worked with smaller species, shared technology with independent traders, and helped colonies that others had abandoned. Every act of kindness, every shared idea, spread their influence further, and slowly, without war or force, humanity became the thread connecting the galaxy together. Still, in the dark halls of the consortium archives, a few researchers kept digging into the old myths. They found fragments of an even older truth, one that predated all recorded history. According to those records, the contagion didn't come from outside the galaxy. It had begun inside it millions of years ago. It had appeared, spread, and then vanished without explanation. Some believed that whatever that ancient force was, it had never truly disappeared. It had gone quiet, waiting, and now perhaps it had found a new vessel, a species perfectly suited to carry it once more. A species curious enough to explore everything, emotional enough to connect with everyone, and stubborn enough to survive anything. That species was humanity. No one could prove it. No one dared to speak it publicly, but deep inside many felt it. Something about humans felt familiar, like an echo from the galaxy's own memory. It was as if the universe had seen them before, long ago, and was now seeing them again. By the end of humanity's first century among the stars, every race in the galaxy had an opinion about them. To some they were friends, to others a threat, but to everyone they were a mystery. They didn't fit the pattern of any species before them. They didn't follow the expected path. They didn't stop where others would. And somewhere far beyond the borders of explored space, the old transmitters of forgotten civilizations still pulsed weakly in the dark, repeating the same ancient message. When they arrive, do not fight them. Do not fear them. For they are the beginning and they are the reflection of what you truly are. The galaxy didn't understand what that meant yet, but soon it would, because humanity had only just begun. After the first contact years, things began to change quickly. Humanity was no longer the small, confused newcomer of the galaxy. They had learned how to communicate, how to trade, and how to live among alien species that had once thought of them as strange creatures from a backwater world. At first, everyone expected humans to struggle. The galaxy was complicated, filled with laws, politics, and systems that even advanced civilizations found hard to navigate. But somehow humans not only adapted, they started helping others do the same. They had a way of looking at problems differently. Where others saw limits, humans saw possibilities. A small example was the way they handled diplomacy. When two alien empires almost went to war over mining rights, it wasn't the consortium that calmed things down. It was a group of human negotiators who found a way for both sides to win. They didn't use tricks or threats. They just listened, asked questions no one else had asked, and made everyone feel heard. It was so simple that it almost embarrassed the older races. But it worked. That was the beginning of something new. Soon, the galaxy started to see humans not as intruders but as bridges, linking species that had never trusted each other before. Their colonies became melting pots of different cultures. On one human world, it wasn't strange to see 10 different species walking through the same streets, sharing food, trading ideas, and even building families together. Humans didn't just learn from others, they taught others how to live together. Still, not everyone was happy about this. The consortium's higher council grew worried. Humanity was spreading faster than any species had in history. They didn't have the most powerful ships or weapons, but they had something far more dangerous: unity. Wherever they went, others followed. It wasn't forced, it was natural. One council member once said, "Humans are like fire. They bring warmth, but they can also change everything they touch." And he was right. Within just a few decades, human engineers began redesigning alien technology. They didn't just copy what they learned, they improved it. They took starship engines that had been used for centuries and made them faster. They made life support systems smaller, stronger, and cheaper. Even simple things like food production and medicine became better after humans got involved. But their most remarkable trait wasn't intelligence. It was curiosity. They wanted to understand everything. Why some planets had life and others didn't. Why some civilizations collapsed and others thrived. They explored dangerous zones no one dared to enter. They mapped ancient ruins that had been abandoned for millennia. They dug, studied, and asked endless questions. It wasn't long before their discoveries started changing the balance of power. Many alien scientists were impressed, but a few were uneasy. Some believed humans were moving too fast, uncovering things that should have stayed buried. The consortium began quietly blocking their access to certain research zones, saying it was for safety reasons. But everyone knew what it really was: fear. The more humans learned, the more unpredictable the galaxy became, and yet, despite all that tension, humanity never lost its heart. They didn't build empires or demand obedience. They built friendships. Their colonies were full of laughter, art, and strange songs that mixed alien melodies with human rhythm. Even in the cold void of space, they found ways to make life feel warm. On one mining moon where work was hard and living conditions were poor, a group of humans started a festival. They built lanterns out of scrap metal, decorated the dusty halls with light, and invited everyone to join. At first, the alien miners didn't understand why. There was nothing to celebrate. No great event, no success, no discovery. But the humans said something simple: "We don't wait for good days to feel alive. We create them." That night became a tradition. Every year, the Festival of Light was celebrated not only on that moon, but across dozens of colonies. It became a symbol of humanity's spirit, the ability to find joy even in the darkest places. Stories like that spread quickly. Merchants wanted to trade with humans because they were fair and inventive. Scientists wanted to work with them because they thought differently. Even soldiers respected them because humans had courage that bordered on madness. They were not the strongest fighters, but they never backed down from protecting others. There was a saying that started circulating among alien fleets: "If a human is your ally, you'll never face the dark alone." It wasn't just a saying, it was the truth. But the more humanity grew, the more the consortium began to feel they were losing control. They had ruled the galaxy's order for thousands of years. They believed they had seen everything. Yet this young species had come from nowhere and changed how everyone thought about progress, cooperation, and even hope. Some in the council wanted to limit them completely, to ban human expansion, close the borders, and isolate Earth. Others argued that such actions would cause chaos. After all, the smaller species had already grown too close to humans. Any move against them might spark rebellion, so instead of open conflict, the consortium chose subtle control. They started introducing restrictions. Humans were no longer allowed to explore ancient ruins without permission. Their colonies were taxed more heavily. Their scientific data was reviewed before publication. It was all done quietly, wrapped in polite words and official procedures. And humanity, at least on the surface, accepted it. They smiled, obeyed the rules, and played along. But behind that calm front, something else was happening. Humans were learning even faster. They were no longer just students of the galaxy. They were becoming creators in their own right. They began building their own deep space research fleets, sending them into regions no one else dared to explore. These ships didn't carry soldiers or politicians, they carried thinkers, engineers, and dreamers. They worked together not under orders but under purpose, and that purpose was clear: to understand the galaxy, not control it. During one expedition, a human-led team discovered an ancient derelict world, dead, silent, and covered in strange markings. They found traces of an unknown species that had once ruled the stars but vanished without explanation. Most saw it as another archaeological mystery, but the humans felt something else. Something about that place resonated with them, as if they were walking through the memory of something forgotten. That feeling stayed with them. Over the next few years, more of these ruins were found, scattered across distant systems, and every time humans touched their walls, something unusual happened. Devices flickered to life, lights glowed faintly, or strange symbols rearranged themselves as if responding to their presence. No other species could trigger these reactions. Only humans. Rumors began to spread quietly at first. Some said humans had an unknown connection to these ancient structures. Others believed they had awakened something sleeping beneath the surface of the galaxy. The consortium dismissed these claims as superstition, but privately their scientists were terrified. It wasn't just that humans were evolving quickly. It was that the galaxy seemed to be evolving with them. In mixed colonies where humans lived side by side with aliens, small biological changes were recorded. Slight improvements in healing, faster neural responses, stronger emotional empathy. No one could explain it, but it was real. It was as if something invisible was spreading through interaction, through contact, through shared experience. The older races called it the human effect. And once again, the ancient warnings came to mind. They remembered the words that had been passed down for ages. They will change us and we will change with them. But what did that really mean? No one knew. As time passed, more and more civilizations began to secretly rely on humans. They were the ones who could fix what others broke. They were the ones who turned disaster into opportunity. Even the most distant worlds had stories of a small human group who came, helped, and left without asking for anything in return. In the grand halls of the consortium, the leaders tried to maintain control, but they couldn't stop the quiet truth spreading across the stars. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were becoming necessary. No one realized it yet, but something deep and ancient had already begun moving. It wasn't war. It wasn't rebellion. It was something quieter and far more powerful. The galaxy was starting to change, not because humanity forced it, but because humanity inspired it, and soon, that inspiration would uncover something far beyond anyone's understanding, something that had been waiting for them all along. As the years passed, the galaxy began to notice something impossible to ignore. Humanity was no longer the small and curious newcomer. They were becoming a quiet force that changed the balance of everything. When humans first arrived, they had begged for help and guidance from the older races. Now those same civilizations were asking them for help, and somehow humanity always delivered. They didn't have the largest fleets or the richest worlds, but they had something that no one else could match. A strange kind of determination that seemed endless. If a system collapsed, they rebuilt it. If an idea failed, they turned it into something new. They didn't see limits the way others did. They believed everything could be fixed, improved, or reinvented. Soon, every sector of the galaxy had something human-made in it. Sometimes it was a small invention, a better medical device, a new power system, or a faster communication relay. Other times it was something bigger, like new space routes that connected distant colonies and made trade easier for everyone. Humans didn't keep their discoveries to themselves. They shared everything, and that sharing made them powerful. The consortium, however, wasn't happy about it. They had ruled the galaxy's politics for thousands of years, carefully keeping every race in balance. But now humanity's rise was shifting that balance. Trade routes that once went through consortium-controlled systems now went through human ones. Independent colonies started looking to human leaders for advice instead of the consortium. And most troubling of all, Humans were being trusted. For many alien races, trust was a rare thing. But humanity earned it not through strength but through sincerity. When a promise was made, it was kept. When they said they would help, they did. Even when it cost them something, they followed through. That kind of honesty had been missing in the galaxy for a very long time, and slowly it was changing everything. Still, the consortium couldn't act openly against them. Humanity was too loved by too many. Instead, the leaders met in secret in quiet chambers hidden behind layers of silence. There they discussed what to do about the growing human problem. Some argued that humanity was harmless, that their rise would stabilize the galaxy. Others warned that this was how it always began. According to the ancient records, a species like humanity had appeared once before. They had risen, spread, and eventually brought about a great collapse that nearly destroyed the galaxy. The records were unclear about how or why, but the story was enough to frighten them. What if history was repeating itself? What if the old warning, the one that said, "They will come from the cradle of chaos," was about humans? The council decided to act carefully. They increased surveillance on human colonies. They restricted access to advanced technology, claiming it was for safety. They began sending observers to Earth, officially as advisors but secretly as spies. At first, humans didn't seem to notice, or maybe they just didn't care. They kept building, inventing, and expanding. Their curiosity was unstoppable. Every time they were told you can't, they simply asked, why not? But then something strange began to happen. In the outer systems, far from the consortium's influence, human explorers found things, ruins, structures, and artifacts buried deep beneath alien worlds. These were not made by any known civilization. They were ancient, older than even the oldest races remembered. And when human scientists touched these relics, strange things happened. Machines that had been dead for millions of years suddenly powered on. Symbols carved into stone began to glow faintly. Devices no one could understand began to hum again. At first, it seemed like coincidence, but it kept happening, always when humans were nearby. Other species tried to repeat the same experiments, but nothing worked. The ancient technology stayed silent for everyone else. Only humans could awaken it. This terrified the consortium. They sent fleets to quarantine the discovered worlds, calling them restricted research zones. They said it was to prevent technological contamination. But rumors spread quickly, especially among smaller civilizations who had long distrusted the consortium's secrecy. Some said the humans had found proof that they weren't newcomers at all, that they had a forgotten connection to something older, something cosmic. And the more the consortium tried to hide it, the more curious humanity became. Teams of human explorers went deeper into the uncharted zones. They found carvings and symbols that depicted a shape strangely familiar, the human form. Not exactly the same, but close enough that even non-humans noticed it. It was as if whoever built those ruins had known about humans long before Earth even existed. That discovery changed everything. When the news leaked out, it spread across the galaxy like wildfire. People began to question everything they thought they knew about history. How could humans appear in ancient alien ruins millions of years old? Had humanity existed before in another form? Or was something guiding them? Something that wanted them to find these relics? The consortium tried to control the narrative, but it was too late. Once an idea was out in the galaxy, it couldn't be stopped. Meanwhile, humanity kept evolving in unexpected ways. Their technology began to merge with alien designs, creating hybrids that were more advanced than anything before. Their ships could travel farther, faster, and with less energy. Their scientists discovered new energy patterns that others couldn't even detect. Their bodies, too, began to change in small ways. Stronger immune systems, faster neural responses. It wasn't enough to alarm anyone yet, but the pattern was clear. Something inside humans was awakening. The older races whispered among themselves, "They're becoming something else." But humanity didn't see it that way. To them, it was just progress, another step forward in their endless curiosity. They didn't realize that even the galaxy itself seemed to be responding to their presence. In mixed colonies, where humans lived with other species, strange harmonies began to form. Shared thoughts, emotional links, and instincts that no one could explain. It was as if all minds were becoming more connected, more aware of each other. Scientists called it cross-species empathy. But some old scholars saw it for what it truly was, a sign that the galaxy was waking up. Still, not everyone welcomed these changes. Some feared that humanity was a threat, not because of violence but because of what they represented. They were unpredictable. They couldn't be controlled. And worst of all, they made others question. Entire generations of alien youth began to admire humans. They dressed like them, spoke like them, and even tried to think like them. Human music filled alien cities. Human art hung in alien museums. The old powers watched in frustration as their traditions slowly blended into something new. A shared culture that belonged to no one, yet connected everyone. The consortium's control was slipping, so they tried one final move, a coordinated restriction on all human-led research and trade. Overnight, human ships were denied access to major starports. Human colonies lost supply routes. Diplomatic representatives were recalled for review. It was a silent attack, not with weapons, but with politics and isolation. For a moment it worked. Human expansion slowed. Their outer colonies struggled. But then something unexpected happened. The smaller species, the ones humanity had helped for years, stood up for them. Entire planets refused consortium orders. Trade networks began rerouting supplies directly to human worlds, bypassing the central systems. Alien fleets offered protection to human colonies not out of debt but out of friendship. It was the first time in history that the galaxy acted against the consortium's will. And humanity? They didn't respond with anger or war. They simply thanked their allies and kept working. They fixed what they could, rebuilt what they lost, and moved forward as if nothing had changed, but something had changed. Something deep and unstoppable. For the first time, the galaxy began to realize that humanity's power didn't come from their technology or their armies. It came from something far more dangerous, their spirit. Their ability to adapt, to connect, and to turn enemies into allies. Even those who hated them couldn't ignore it anymore. Humanity was not spreading through conquest. They were spreading through influence, through cooperation, through empathy, through their simple belief that things could always be better. And deep beneath the stars, in forgotten ruins and ancient machines, something stirred, something old enough to remember the first warning ever spoken. They will come again. They will awaken what sleeps, and by the time we understand, it will already be inside us all. The galaxy didn't understand what that meant yet, but soon they would, because humanity's rise was no longer just a story of survival. It was becoming a story of transformation, and the balance of the galaxy would never be the same again. Far beyond the busy trade routes and shining colonies, there were still silent worlds. Planets untouched for millions of years, floating quietly in the dark. Most explorers avoided them. The consortium had labeled many of these worlds as dead zones, claiming they were unstable, lifeless, or too dangerous to visit. But humans never listened to warnings like that. They had always believed that where there was mystery, there was truth waiting to be found. A small team of human researchers landed on one such world, a gray, silent planet orbiting a dying star. It had no name, only a code that marked it as uninhabitable. But humans had learned long ago that uninhabitable didn't always mean empty. They explored its surface for weeks, digging through layers of dust and rock. What they found beneath was something no one expected. A massive structure buried deep underground, older than any civilization known. Its walls were covered in symbols that pulsed faintly when touched. The air inside felt alive, as if the place was waiting for someone. At the very center, they discovered a chamber. Floating in the middle was a strange object, small, glowing, and warm to the touch. It wasn't made of metal or stone, but something in between. It seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like a heartbeat. They didn't know what it was, but it radiated something powerful, something familiar. They called it the Seed. The team sent word back to Human Command, and soon more scientists arrived. They built a research outpost around the chamber, studying the Seed day and night. It didn't react to machines or scanners, but when one of the researchers accidentally brushed it with bare skin, the Seed came alive. It glowed brighter and strange symbols appeared around it, symbols that no one could translate. It was as if the object had recognized the human touch. The scientists were stunned. When other species tried to interact with it, nothing happened. Only humans could awaken it. Word of the discovery spread quickly, And it didn't take long for the consortium to get involved. They demanded that the seed be handed over for safe containment, but the human colonies refused. They said it was found through their efforts and belonged to everyone, not just the ruling powers. Tension began to rise once again. For months, the humans studied the seed in secret. They found that it was not just an artifact, it was alive. It responded to human DNA, heartbeat, even emotion. It wasn't a weapon or a machine. It was something older, something that carried the essence of creation itself. The scientists began to notice strange changes in those who spent too much time near it. Their thoughts became clearer, their health improved, and their instincts grew sharper. It was as if the seed was teaching them, shaping them, helping them evolve. They soon realized something even more shocking. The seed wasn't reacting to humanity. It was reacting with them. It was completing a connection that had been waiting for ages. When word of this leaked into the galaxy, fear spread faster than light. The consortium called an emergency meeting. They said humanity had uncovered something that could destroy everything. Old species who remembered the ancient warnings began whispering in fear. The words came back again. They will awaken what sleeps. But no one truly understood what that meant. Back on the research world, the humans kept their focus. They weren't afraid. To them, the seed wasn't evil. It felt peaceful, alive, and deeply familiar. When one scientist placed his hand on it, he described seeing flashes of memory, visions of stars being born, galaxies forming, and ancient beings building worlds. He felt emotions not from himself, but from something vast and timeless. It was as if the universe itself was trying to speak through the seed. Soon, they realized something else. The seed wasn't the only one. Scans from across the galaxy began to pick up similar energy patterns buried deep in other worlds. Sleeping, waiting. Humanity had found the first, but there were more. And wherever humans went, those seeds began to awaken. At first it was small, a faint pulse under the surface of distant planets. Then came lights flickering in ancient ruins, machines that hadn't worked for ages suddenly humming again. The pattern was unmistakable. It was connected to humanity. The galaxy had been quiet for millions of years, and now it was coming alive again. The consortium tried to stop the research. They sent warnings, then ships, and finally blockades. But it was too late. The truth couldn't be contained anymore. Independent worlds began to send messages of support to humanity. Some said that the seeds were a gift meant for all intelligent life. Others believed they were the core of something greater, a network that once connected every mind, every species, every soul in the galaxy. Whatever it was, humans were the key, but not everyone saw it as a blessing. Some feared that the seeds would change them in ways they couldn't control. Others claimed that humanity had become the carriers of a forgotten force, a power that once nearly destroyed the stars. In the midst of the growing fear, something incredible happened. The seed on the human research planet bloomed. It unfolded like a flower made of light. Beams of energy spread across the room, touching every human inside, their minds filled with warmth, as if they had become part of something infinite. And then for a brief moment they understood. The seed showed them what it truly was, a living memory of the first civilization that ever existed in the galaxy. That civilization had not vanished, it had transformed. When its time came to an end, it left behind fragments of itself, hidden across the stars, waiting for a species capable of reigniting what was lost. That species was humanity. They were not the beginning. They were the continuation. The seed faded after that, dimming slowly until it returned to its quiet glow. But the message it left behind stayed in their hearts. Humanity realized that they had inherited something ancient, not a weapon, not technology, but a purpose, the purpose to reconnect what had been broken. The galaxy had long been divided, species fighting, competing and isolating themselves from one another. The seeds had been waiting for someone who could bring unity again. And humanity, with their stubborn hope and endless curiosity, was that someone. Still, the consortium refused to believe it. They accused humans of fabricating the story to gain power. But even their own scientists couldn't explain why the ancient energy signatures were increasing in strength across the galaxy, or why humans were the only ones who could interact with them. Strange. Events began happening everywhere. On distant planets, alien children began dreaming of the same images: light, unity, and the feeling of being part of something vast. Machines started syncing on their own, creating patterns that matched the seed's pulse. Even the stars in some regions flickered in rhythm with it, as if the galaxy was breathing again. Some called it the awakening. Others called it the return. Whatever it was spreading fast, and humanity stood at the center of it all, not as rulers, but as messengers. Many humans didn't even understand the scale of what they had started. To them, it still felt like exploration, like learning. They didn't see themselves as chosen or special. They just wanted to understand the truth. But that was exactly why the seeds had chosen them, because they sought knowledge without greed, connection without control. Across the galaxy, the old powers tried everything to stop it: information control, political pressure, even direct confrontation, but nothing worked. The change was already happening, not through war or conquest, but through connection. Everywhere humanity went, things began to grow, heal, and evolve. The galaxy was waking up, and for the first time in millions of years, it felt alive again. The oldest scholars of the consortium gathered in silence, reading through the oldest records once more. Their hands trembled as they came across a final line written by a civilization long gone: "When they rise again, do not resist them. They are not your end, they are your reflection." By the time they understood, it was already too late. The seed had bloomed. The signal had spread, and the entire galaxy was beginning to feel it. The moment the seed bloomed, everything changed. The light that spread from that small chamber didn't stop at the walls or even the planet's surface. It reached far beyond, crossing the cold darkness between stars like ripples on a still lake. No one could see it with their eyes, but they could feel it. Across colonies, stations, and even distant mining outposts, people paused for no clear reason. They felt a quiet warmth in their chest, a pulse that seemed to echo their own heartbeat. It was gentle but powerful, like something ancient had just awakened inside every living thing. At first, no one knew what it meant. Governments tried to calm their people. Scientists struggled to explain it, and the consortium demanded silence. But truth spreads on its own. Within days, recordings began to appear: strange readings, flickers in the skies, sudden bursts of light over worlds that had been quiet for centuries. The same energy pattern was everywhere. Something was happening, and it was centered around humanity. Human researchers who had been studying the first seed noticed that the more the pulse spread, the more responsive it became. Its surface began to shimmer with faint images: stars, faces, and places no one had ever seen. Some said it was showing the memories of the ancient civilization that made it. Others believed it was showing the future. But deep inside, most humans felt something simpler. It wasn't about power or technology, it was about belonging. For the first time, they didn't feel like outsiders in the galaxy. They felt connected. The consortium didn't like that. Meetings were held across the galactic core. Leaders spoke in worried tones, warning that humanity had unleashed something uncontrollable. Some suggested wiping out the seed sites before they could grow stronger. Others feared it was already too late. In secret, fleets began to move, but humanity was no longer the same as before. When the first fleet tried to block human research ships, the humans didn't respond with weapons. Instead, they transmitted a single signal, a pattern that matched the pulse of the seed. And then something unbelievable happened. The attacking ship's systems began to flicker. The seed's energy reached them through the signal, not to harm but to communicate. The crews aboard those ships reported hearing faint whispers, not in words, but in feelings. Calm, curiosity, understanding. They said it was like the universe itself was speaking to them. After that, the battle never happened. The ships withdrew, confused and shaken. The commanders couldn't explain why their soldiers refused to fire. But those who had felt that presence knew the truth. Once the seed touched your mind, it was impossible to see others as enemies. Meanwhile, on human worlds, something beautiful began to unfold. Children started dreaming of stars connected by lines of light. Artists painted the same symbols that the seeds displayed. Farmers noticed that their crops grew stronger when exposed to the seed's pulse. Even machines, my simple tools and drones, began working in perfect harmony. as if they could sense the rhythm of life itself. The seeds weren't changing the galaxy through force, they were harmonizing it. Many alien scientists who once feared humanity began reaching out to work with them. They saw that the seeds were not weapons but bridges. Each one was a piece of a network, and humanity had become the missing link that completed it. But even in the face of wonder, fear persisted. Some of the oldest species in the galaxy, the ones who had lived through countless wars, couldn't let go of their suspicion. They remembered the ancient warnings that spoke of the return of the inner light. They thought it meant destruction, not rebirth, so while humanity reached out with open hands, the consortium prepared for something darker. They believed that if they couldn't control the seeds, they had to contain or destroy them before they changed everything. They didn't realize the change had already begun. On one quiet night, deep within human space, hundreds of seeds across different colonies activated at once. They rose into the sky, forming lines of light that stretched toward the stars. For a moment, it looked like the galaxy itself was drawing a map of connection. Every living being who looked up at that sight felt something inside them shift. Some wept, some fell silent. Some finally understood that life had never been separate. Everything, every creature, every star, every thought, had always been connected through something unseen. The seeds were just awakening that truth. As the light spread, it reached even the distant alien worlds that had rejected humanity, and when it touched them, their skies too began to glow, the same heartbeat, the same warmth, the same quiet voice whispering not words but understanding. It wasn't invasion. It was remembrance. Still, fear made some leaders desperate. They gathered fleets to attack the human systems, hoping to destroy the main seed before the change became permanent. But when they arrived, they found something unexpected. The human ships didn't form battle lines. They didn't charge or retreat. They simply floated in formation, unarmed, surrounding the glowing seed that pulsed like a living star. And as the alien fleets approached, the seed responded again. It didn't unleash destruction. Instead, it sent out waves of energy that passed harmlessly through metal and armor, directly touching every mind. Suddenly, the crews of those ships could see through each other's eyes. They felt the thoughts and fears of others, the pain, the hope, the longing for peace. There was no hiding from it, no pretending to be separate. For the first time in galactic history, millions of beings understood what it meant to be one. Many ships powered down immediately. Some wept in silence. Others simply stared at the humans in disbelief, realizing that what they had been afraid of all along was not humanity's power, but their reflection within it. Because the seed wasn't something foreign that humanity had brought. It was something that had always been there, inside every living thing waiting to awaken. The galaxy had warned itself about humans, but it was never about destruction. It was about rediscovery. Humanity wasn't bringing something new into existence. They were just reminding the stars what they had forgotten, that life had once been one great consciousness, shattered over time, now finding its way back. The old words that had once sounded like fear were now being understood differently. They warned the galaxy about us, but they didn't realize it was inside all along. As days turned to weeks, the seeds grew brighter and calmer. The energy they emitted stabilized the regions around them. Worlds that had been polluted for centuries began to heal. Storms softened. Ecosystems started to recover. Even dying stars pulsed brighter, as if fed by the harmony spreading. Through the cosmic web, it was no longer about humans or aliens, it was about life itself. Remembering its unity, some scientists tried to explain it scientifically. Energy resonance, quantum consciousness, or ancient bionetwork theories. But the truth was beyond calculation. It was something spiritual, something that could only be felt, not measured. And the humans, they didn't claim control or ownership. They didn't build empires or demand worship. They simply watched, humbled and grateful, as the galaxy transformed around them. The once isolated species began talking again, rebuilding old friendships, trading knowledge, and working together to understand what was happening. Peace, which once seemed impossible, began to take root naturally, not enforced but chosen. Even the consortium, the proud rulers of old, finally lowered their defenses. They sent a delegation to the humans, not with demands but with questions. They asked, "How did you do it?" The humans smiled and simply said, "We didn't. We just listened." For a moment, the galaxy was silent again, but it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of peace. The seeds continued to hum softly across the stars, like a heartbeat that connected every world. They were alive, but calm, content, watching over the civilizations that had once feared them. And deep in the center of the galaxy, where light had never reached before, another seed began to awaken, larger, older, brighter than all the rest. It pulsed once, then again, sending out waves that echoed across creation. This was not the end. It was the beginning of something new, a rebirth of what had been lost long ago. And at the center of it all, humanity stood quietly and no longer seen as outsiders, but as the spark that reminded existence of its own soul. The galaxy had warned itself about them for ages, but in truth it had only been warning itself to remember, because the light was never outside. It was always within. The great light that spread through the galaxy did not fade. It changed, softening from a blinding brightness to a warm, steady glow. Every world, every ship, every living creature could feel it. It wasn't loud or overwhelming. It was like the quiet heartbeat of existence itself, steady and comforting. No one was fighting anymore. The fleets that once filled the sky were now still drifting in silence. The sound of war had been replaced by the hum of peace. For the first time in millions of years, the galaxy was calm. But humanity knew this was not the end. It was something new, something only beginning to take shape. Across different worlds, people began to change, not in a way that could be seen, but in how they felt. They started noticing connections, a sense of understanding that went beyond words. When someone suffered, others could feel it. When someone laughed, joy rippled through those around them. It wasn't mind-reading or control. It was empathy, pure and real. The seeds had awakened something that was always there. It had just been forgotten under layers of fear and time. On the first research planet where the seed was discovered, the scientists who had once guarded it now sat in quiet circles, watching it pulse. They didn't study it anymore. There was nothing left to dissect or measure. The seed wasn't an object of study. It was a living memory, a teacher and a reminder. The old records of many alien civilizations were now being reread with new understanding. What they once thought were warnings about humanity now made sense. The phrase, "they will awaken what sleeps," was not about destruction. It was a prophecy of renewal. The galaxy had feared humans because they didn't understand them. But fear had never stopped humans from reaching out, exploring, and seeking meaning. Their curiosity, the same trait that others mocked, had become the key that unlocked an ancient truth. The truth that life, no matter its form or origin, was part of one endless story. As more seeds bloomed, massive patterns began forming across the galaxy. From above, they looked like constellations linked by glowing lines. The energy wasn't random. It was creating something larger, a vast network of light that seemed to pulse with intelligence. Scientists called it the lattice of life. But to most people, it was simply known as the connection. And through this connection, the galaxy started healing in ways no one imagined possible. Worlds that had been dying began to recover. Ancient ruins started powering up again. Even the stars that were fading came back to life, their light growing stronger. Everywhere the seeds reached, balance returned. The consortium finally accepted what humanity had discovered. They dissolved their old system of control and opened communication with all species. No more hierarchy, no more fear. The galaxy began to rebuild itself not under one rule, but as one family. Humanity didn't claim leadership. They didn't need to. They had never wanted to rule. They just wanted to belong. And now they did. But there was still one mystery left, the largest seed that had begun to awaken at the center of the galaxy. It pulsed slower than the others, as if waiting. Every time it beat, all the other seeds across the galaxy responded in harmony. Like millions of hearts syncing to one rhythm, ships from hundreds of worlds gathered near the galactic core to witness it. No one knew what would happen when it fully awakened. Some were afraid, but most were simply curious. When the time came, it didn't explode or shine with violent energy. It opened, gently, beautifully, like a blooming flower made of starlight. Inside there was no weapon, no machine, no ancient throne. There was only light. It spread slowly, washing over everything and everyone. In that moment, every mind, human, alien, mechanical, saw the same vision. They saw the first civilization billions of years ago. The beings who had created the seeds were not gods or monsters. They were explorers just like humans. They had once loved, fought, learned, and dreamed. But when their time came to an end, they didn't want their story to vanish. They turned their memories into light and sent it into the universe, scattering it across the stars, hoping one day someone would find it again and continue the journey. That someone was humanity. Not because they were powerful or chosen, but because they had the one thing the universe needed most: curiosity, the courage to ask questions, the will to connect. The vision showed how the seeds had waited silently for millions of years, hidden deep in planets, comets, and forgotten ruins, listening for a voice that matched their frequency. And when humans came, filled with wonder, not fear, the seeds finally responded. When the vision ended, the light faded. But what it left behind was more than memory. It was understanding. Every being who had seen it now carried a piece of that truth inside them. They no longer looked at each other as strangers. They began to see the same spark of life and the same light in every face, every creature, every world. Humanity returned to their colonies, but they were different now. The wars that once divided them seemed meaningless. The hunger for control was replaced by a hunger to create, to build, to share. In cities that had once been filled with walls and fear, people started planting trees again. Children played under open skies without worry. Even in places where machines ruled for centuries, laughter returned. It wasn't perfect, it never could be. There were still disagreements, challenges, and moments of doubt, but something had changed deep inside the hearts of all. They knew they were part of something greater, not controlled by it but connected to it. Years passed, and the seeds continued to hum quietly across the galaxy. No longer symbols of mystery, they became symbols of life's unity. Every culture celebrated them differently, through songs, art, or quiet meditation. But all agreed on one thing. They reminded everyone where they came from and where they were going. Humanity didn't stop exploring. They traveled farther than ever before, beyond the known edges of the galaxy. They didn't search for conquest or riches anymore, they searched for understanding. And in their journeys they found more seeds, still sleeping in the darkness, waiting to join the great network of light. Wherever humans went, they brought warmth and connection with them. Planets that had been isolated for ages opened their skies again. Species that once hid in fear began to trust, and slowly, the galaxy turned into something it had never been before, a living, breathing harmony. The old scholars who had once warned against humanity looked up at the glowing night sky and whispered in awe. The prophecy had come true, but not as they had feared. The galaxy had not been conquered, it had been healed, and the words once said with fear now carried peace. They warned the galaxy about them, but they didn't realize, and it was inside all along, because the light that awakened through humanity had never been foreign. It had never belonged to any one species. It was the heartbeat of creation itself, hidden in every life form, waiting for the right spark to awaken it again. And that spark was humanity's simple, endless drive to understand, to connect, to care, to reach out. Even when the universe seemed vast and cold, the stars now pulsed in rhythm, slow and steady, like the breathing of something eternal. The seeds had done their work. Life had remembered itself. Some said the galaxy itself had become alive, and not in metaphor but in truth. Every planet, every sun, every being was part of a single, endless consciousness. But to the humans walking under the glowing night, it was simpler than that. They didn't see gods or miracles. They saw each other, truly, completely, and that was enough. They knew now that being alive was not about power, or technology, or control. It was about connection, about the quiet courage to reach out and say, "I see you." And in that connection, they found something greater than any discovery. They found home, the galaxy, once dark and divided, now shown as one vast web of light. Billions of lives glowing together, breathing together, remembering together. Humanity had not changed the universe. They had simply reminded it of what it already was. The light was never out there in the stars. It had always been inside, waiting to be seen.